Hello viewers, tonight I'm going to talk about my favorite character from Baldur's Gate 3 as well as the Drow and their representation in many of the games that are released. Well, there have not been very many D&D games released as video games, I'll put it that way. There's Neverwinter Nights, there's Baldur's Gate, there's a few other games, but truth be told, D&D, the concepts have sort of been sort of appropriated by other different, groups and companies over the years. The ideas have really sort of been, they have sort of been taken and developed by other people. And so, truth be told, Drow, dark elves, you can find dark elves in a lot of other types of RPGs, not just ones associated with D&D. Pathfinder, you can find them in, let me think, Skyrim, Elder Scrolls, that is to say, and many other different RPGs. You can find dark elves in a lot of these different games and RPGs. You can find elves in general in plenty of RPGs. So, really, D&D is usually sort of tabletop or sort of pen and paper campaigns for the most part. Myself, I'm more partial to the pen and paper fantasy type stuff, just using the material to sort of come up with my own stories, but sort of in a Lovecraftian way. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard and a lot of those people used to use the same ideas. So in a way, considering that a lot of ideas from D&D like mind flayers and different, alien and magical type concepts came from Robert E. Howard and, Clark Anderson and, what was his name? Not Clark Ashton Smith, I mean to say, the Lovecraft Circle. They helped a lot, or at least their ideas were used for a lot of D&D content. Dungeons and Dragons, that is to say. And so, in that sense, I suppose the tradition really has sort of become quite, popular in that sense. And so other video game companies do it. Now, Larian, had their opportunity to make their own Baldur's Gate game, as we know. And they gave us Minthara, who, as a character, many of us, myself and many other people, were very excited to have a Drow. For myself, out of any of the races in Dungeons and Dragons, I really like Drow. Now, I do understand that the previous video that I made did cause some contention. It was even shared on someone's Discord, which I don't know whose it was, but people were talking about it. And I think it sort of annoyed some people because I had some negative things to say about Baldur's Gate 3. And I will say that, truth be told, Baldur's Gate 3 was just... It did not really provide, for me, what I would consider to be a full experience of camping and traveling. In other words, the camp system that they had was very exciting. But I did not feel as though I was going very, to many places. Basically, you go to you're traveling to Baldur's Gate. In Act 3, you are in Baldur's Gate. And when you are in Baldur's Gate, you stay in Baldur's Gate. And Baldur's Gate Act 3 really has the most to do. The problem is, the most to do is in the city. And when you're in the city, you get to go to Elfsong Tavern, you get yourself a room, and basically, you really do not have to worry about traveling in the wilderness, which to me, in an RPG, is the sort of pinnacle of RPG experience. This idea of traveling in the wilderness on the road. And, the experience of being in the town or city is it's supplementary to that, or it should be. Which is why I said, hey, if I had to choose, I would go back to the old Dark Alliance games from the PS2. And I really mean that. And I think that must have annoyed some people, because people say, oh, Dark Alliance does not even have, many character interactions. But it's just the fact that I'm traveling. I feel like I'm on the go. There's a certain degree of fluidity to games like, Dragon Age or Dark Alliance or, so many RPGs. There is a time when it is sort of acceptable to be stuck in one area. At least for me. For example, when you are playing Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, in the beginning part of that game, you are restricted to the city until basically you fight your way out of the city. But before then, you cannot go outside of the city. Now, imagine having a video game where the last act of the video game, you are now in the city and you cannot get out. And in my whole video, regardless of whatever opinions I express, that's what I was trying to say. And many people, who most logical people are able to understand that, but it doth not matter. I understand some people paid $60 for this game. If they bought the sort of physical collector's edition, I imagine they paid more than $60. So, people do not like to be told, hey, you paid a lot of money for something that, was not as big as it should be. In other words, you underpaid. If you consider what other games like Dragon Age and Dragon's Dogma gave the players, no, if anything, we overpaid for the experience, because a lot of games give us more content. We get to move our little characters around in more areas, and it's just a better experience. But anyhow, I want to get back to my subject, which is Drow, which is Minthara, which is the fact that in Baldur's Gate 3, we were lucky to get at least one Drow companion character, Minthara, which some people say Minthara was planned to be a companion character, and at the same time, Minthara went through a lot of changes. A lot of people, unless you were playing early access at the very beginning, before patch 5, patch 4 and up, you basically have seen all of the changes that Minthara has went through. And it was pretty amazing, let me say that. I was involved in that discussion. Many people were involved in that discussion. It was quite something. Let me say it frankly. On the Larian forums, this was a big topic of discussion. People were talking about, how Minthara looks different. And, there were a lot of comparisons. So, this is, basically, I'm recording this for posterity. I really want people to know about why those of us who play Baldur's Gate, who like Minthara as a character, and like Drow females and Drow male characters or whatever, what they did to Viconia was terrible. Viconia was a character from the earlier, Baldur's Gate games. And for those of you who saw what they did to Viconia and Saravok, it was terrible. It was terrible. Basically, they made Viconia and Saravok to basically be these faithful worshippers. Viconia is a faithful, it's like she's a one-dimensional character. I mean, basically, most people are going to kill Viconia in Baldur's Gate 3. Most people are going to kill Saravok in Baldur's Gate 3. And that really destroys their role in any future Baldur's Gate games. And truth be told, they did not need to bring Saravok and Viconia back. That was another thing that sort of, to me, ruined the story. It was almost as though they trapped us in Baldur's Gate for Act 3 just to, sort of emphasize these old characters like Jaheira and Minsk and Viconia and Saravok, and they ruined the plot lines of those characters. They really did. This could have been a new, fresh game, but they decided to do horrible things with the story. And for those of you, I myself, I've seen other people play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. But I have not played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 myself. But I did like the storyline behind, the Ballspawn Saravok and Viconia, the Worshipper of Shara. But I do not like what they have done with them in Baldur's Gate 3. I really do not. To me, I just think they should have just, did something else. To be honest, I did not think that those characters were treated in a very good way. I think it ruined a lot of the personality of those characters and sort of their motivations and goals. It made them into to be basically, one-dimensional is a good word for them. One-dimensional. But anyhow, today our topic is Minthara. Her changes in patch, 4, 5, and her final iteration. So, this was a long time ago. People do not realize that Minthara was supposed to have short hair. Minthara was not supposed to have long hair at all. If you look in your in the Baldur's Gate 3 art book, if you bought the sort of deluxe edition, you will see that, this is basically what Minthara was supposed to look like. But you see, what they gave us before that was this. A lot of people like this more because, she had dark eyeshadow. Okay, she looked darker. Her armor was dark. It was a very good look. Then they put a lot of makeup on her, like silver makeup. That was terrible. A lot of us had complaints about this. We didn't like the short hairstyle. And, they gave her this sort of reddish armor, and that looked terrible. This may be a surprise to a lot of you who have not really seen, earlier Minthara, but she used to look a lot worse. Which is why a lot of us who were there during early access, we make a big deal about Minthara because we did not think that she would look as good as she does now. Okay, and that is why, for those of us who are really big Minthara fans, it's a big deal to us that Larian actually listened to our criticism. Excuse me for one moment, people. Very sorry for the delay. This, like most of my videos, is being recorded in an unedited manner, so basically, this is being done real time. But yes, one good example, these were the facial expressions that, they messed up on the facial expressions in patch 5. They look terrible. She looked terrible in patch 5. She just looks too happy. Basically, this is sort of the same scene, and as you can see, the patch 4 appearance looked a lot better. The patch 4 appearance looked a lot better, it really did. And so here in this forum, we just talked about that stuff at length. And Larian really took note. So, as you can see, she's saying 40 absolute. She looks really stupid in the above image, but here, it looks more serious. For the character in general, this is just a far better. That was a far better iteration. So, there was a poll that was done, and there weren't many people who voted in it, but overwhelmingly, people basically said no, she does not look better. Patch 5 makeup does not improve her appearance, and people sort of recognized that. And I think at some point in this forum there was some momentum, and basically the overwhelming opinion was Minthara does not look good in patch 5. People, this is some early access history, but it is so serious to some of us, considering just how frustrating it all was. I was there, and I remember in patch 5, I didn't even want to play patch 5 because they made my favorite character Minthara look so bad. I'm thinking, why did they put so much silver eye makeup on her? Why did they make her outfit look so bright? Now, we know eventually they finally gave her a really good looking outfit, but this was before then. Okay? They really made her look terrible. This just goes to show you just how bad makeup can really ruin a character. And when you're trying to make a character look angry, when you have that silver eye makeup, no, that doesn't look good. You can just compare the images. Minthara as a Drow character was supposed to look sort of evil, and basically just, how should I put this? She was supposed to, Drow do not usually look bright. They usually do not look bright silver eye makeup or anything like that. Most of us who like Drow characters want them to look dark and sinister, sort of. So, even from a sort of perspective of just aesthetics, obviously, patch 4 was far better. Okay, but you have to remember, the patch 5, art direction is actually closer to her original art, to the, basically her original concept art looks like this, but the makeup choice was, I think that was more of the game, of what they did in the game engine, in the character creation, which, it really messed that up. Now, Drow women, let me be honest, Drow women usually do not have, short hair. If you read the old D&D books, Drow, of the Underdark and so forth, they usually have long white hair, dark skin. Now, in Baldur's Gate, do they make the Drow look as dark? Usually, most Drow characters I see do not look sort of black. And I think a lot of them, of the artists decide not to make them look just completely, as dark as they would look. Because they don't want to sort of have problems with blackface and sort of make a character like Mr. Popo. But I think really you get in a situation where you have an art style that's like Mr. Popo if you decide to put basically big exaggerated lips on the characters. I think the Drow could have been darker because that's how Drow were supposed to look. They were supposed to have basically black skin. And what I see in Baldur's Gate 3, a lot of the Drow that they make in the game, whether you're talking, any of the Drow characters I've seen, most of the NPC characters, and there were not many Drow NPC characters, have, how should I say this, purplish, pinkish type skin, which I did not, I prefer the black skin Drow. I just do. I think that is more, how should it be said, more realistic, or at least more faithful to the concept of to the Drow concept art, to be honest. So Baldur's Gate, as I said, it was a very short game. The scope of it was very small, but they still had a lot of opportunity to do certain things. I am mostly satisfied with Minthara, but I mean, in the beginning, it was terrible. Because, I mean, for whatever reason, they gave her this ring mail, and they finally changed that, but, personally, excuse me, them fixing the makeup really helped. Now, this whole discussion really changed everything about Minthara as a character, her design. Okay, I mean, it was a pretty amazing thing, really. Every detail was examined. I mean, they found how basically in this armor, it was more broad than the patch 4 armor, and a lot of things were discussed. I have to say that I was glad to have basically been a participant in this discussion. And as I said, I mean, sometimes you play a game and there's only one thing that you are completely satisfied with. I basically, when I bought Baldur's Gate 3, I was expecting for us to have at least one Drow companion character, one Drow character that we could really sort of have in our party. So, I myself and many other people who are sort of people who like Drow as a, D&D race, we really were insistent about this. We were saying, no, we're going to show you, I mean, how bad you messed up this character. I mean, below is patch 4, above is patch 5. I mean, they tried to really use that silver eye makeup. It was going to look terrible. But this goes to show, just how powerful character input, or rather player input can be, player feedback can be. Because we went on the Larium forums and we said, hey, there's problems with the makeup, there's contrast problems, there's all types of problems. The character does not look as a Drow sort of should look. I mean, we want our Drow to look dark. We want our Drow to, look serious. So, I mean, I know that this changed the art direction of Minthara in game. It really did. I mean, for an evil character, I think facial expressions are very important. That was discussed at length. If you want to make a villain or sort of evil character, an anti-hero or an antagonist or what have you, it's very important that you are able to sort of have a face that really sort of expresses anger and just malice. And I mean, I think, for a lot of us, we really complained about, the hairstyle was not so bad, but it was basically the makeup. It should have been darker, to be honest. I mean, as for the armor, a lot of you may remember this. If you don't remember it, then you were not there for early access. The brighter colors were pretty terrible. This was sort of a comparison with a game that had come out, during the time, Final Fantasy Stranger of Paradise. And basically the comparison was that, hey, a character that we expect to really have a sort of angry, serious look to her, they've made really happy in patch 5. In patch 4, she looks serious, she looks angry, she looks like, she is out to murder somebody. And basically, Stranger of Paradise, we had seen the trailer at that time, that was a game that came out, and Tetsuya Nomura basically said, I started planning a Final Fantasy with the theme of the story of an angry man. And I will say, they really made that protagonist, really look like a, I forget the name of this character. But they really made the man look angry. They really made, him into an angry, serious character, and his facial expressions really showed that. Okay? But basically, a lot of the aesthetics were examined. I think just about every character aesthetic was being reviewed, and basically, Karlach and Minthara, they had a lot of changes. To be honest, I don't particularly like what they did with Karlach. I think the armor is just too skimpy for my taste, to the point where, it's not as though I think the armor is just, I don't know. Something is sort of corny about how skimpy and how much of a Mary Sue, how goody two shoes Karlach is. I really do not like it, but I did not like Dame Aelin either. But basically, there was a discussion talking about, hey, maybe less makeup is better on some of these female characters, because, for Minthara, during patch 5, they went overboard with the makeup. So the idea was, there were people saying, maybe it would be better if you gave less makeup to Minthara. You sort of gave her a more natural look, because, or at least give her some darker eyeshadow, some darker eye makeup, because, what we got, during patch 5, it was pretty jarring to many of us. But I think we have a few more, and yeah, we were just comparing and contrasting. This was amazing stuff. This really changed. I cannot tell you how important this particular, forum was, and I believe the name of it was, it's going to be Make Minthara Great Again. It was the original name of the forum. But I think the moderators combined about 2 or 3 different topics together. So, it is a big type of it is a big topic, basically. It is. But yeah, some people do not understand why, there are people like me who really were satisfied with the outcome of Minthara, because there are people now who are playing Baldur's Gate who did not play the early access, who think, well, what is the big deal? Why are some of us, why do some of us think that Minthara is like the best character? Because there were discussions about changing her armor a long time ago, so people were sort of coming up with ideas. Hey, get Minthara in an armor like this because she will look less stupid. In other words, do not use the ringmail. Put Minthara in some cooler armor, in some Drow type armor. And so that was really done. Before Larian had decided to change Minthara's armor, people had come up with the idea of basically just, of basically convincing people, hey, she'll look better in this anyway. And they were right, They were absolutely right. And Larian agreed with us, because eventually they listened to us. Eventually they actually did it. Okay, so for me, Baldur's Gate is a special game for at least this reason, because when we went to the forums and we convinced Larian to literally change Minthara's design, that really showed that what we said mattered. I mean, if you look at any of the older pictures of the Drow, I mean, you know, they are really aesthetically pleasing type of, type of race. I mean, so for many of us, we really do not get to play as dark elves very often. Most games that have elves do not have dark elves. I know Divinity Original Sin 2, they had their own type of elf, but they didn't really look dark. So some of us really like that design, and eventually they finally sort of updated Minthara's appearance. That was great, and they really did listen to everything we said. Every single bit of advice that we had, Ilarion listened to it. They gave her a nice looking updo, long hair, a pretty bun, and they changed the armor. They made it look good. So, that is the story behind the development of Minthara. That is the story behind, what happened, basically. Okay, I mean, it was pretty amazing for many of us that anyone listened. So this just goes to show, if you go on, Larian forums at least, they will listen to the things to the feedback that you give them. And I will say, not many game companies do that. So, although I do have criticisms of Baldur's Gate 3, I will say this. Larian as a company, they, despite their flaws and despite the flaws of Baldur's Gate 3, this was a topic and a subject in which actually they completely listen to the fans. Well, I myself, I don't like to consider myself a fan, but as a gamer, I like good aesthetics. I really do. So for me, and I think they even changed the makeup to some degree. This was like in a later patch during early access. So what they did even with this is they sort of got rid of a lot of her eye makeup. But I mean, she still looks pretty good in this picture. But I have to say, it was an amazing change, compared to the earlier iterations. So I just wanted to record history. I just wanted to basically do a sort of, how should I say, I basically wanted to show people, hey, there are those of us who are dissatisfied with this game, on a level of scope. But there are many things that I actually do really like about it, and this is one. As I said, if there's one good thing I can say about it, they gave us a very well-written Drow female companion. Okay, and that was my favorite part about it. And there were a lot of people in the Larian forums who said the same thing I did. Basically, if you don't, sort of present Minthara as a fully fledged sort of character, Drow character with good aesthetics, we feel like we've wasted our money. And a lot of us said that in the forums. Basically, hey, we really like Drow. Excuse me. For a lot of these Dungeons and Dragons games, for a lot of RPGs, Drow characters and Drow culture is really interesting, but oftentimes we really do not get many of them. And so, for those of us who, sort of see this as, and it is a pretty brutal culture, Drow culture, but still, because they're evil characters, because they're such evil characters, they're really interesting. And I think in Baldur's Gate, what I did not like was that the options for evil playthroughs were sort of, you didn't really have many options for evil playthroughs. As I said, basically there was no real incentive or justification for you to really choose the evil ending. Okay, the evil ending is terrible, by the way. As I said in my previous video, but a lot of us, we usually like, evil Drow characters as part of our stories, as part of these D&D stories, really interesting culture. And I think they really did express that in Minthara's backstory, which was pretty interesting, pretty exciting. I mean, this D&D game book alone, with lore and different details about Drow, is at least 226 pages long. So, this is a race, in the game, which, you can do so much with it. And oftentimes, in Baldur's Gate games, I think it would not be the same if you didn't have a Drow companion. I am glad that they got it right, to be honest. Because some of us thought they were going to mess up Minthara. That's why, for me and other people, we think that the Drow are the coolest elves, to be honest. But yes, I mean, this was just, just a bit of an historical video for you. It may be boring, it may be a bunch of ranting, but, for those of you who did not know, this is why some of us really, really, really like Minthara. It is because in the beginning, in the early access, we thought she was going to be ruined. We thought Minthara was not going to be a very, she was not going to be very, very good as a character, and that she would not even really have much of a role in it. But, I am glad that my feedback and other people's feedback was able to sway the developers. Okay, oh goodness. Something has happened to my internet. But anyhow, let me see if I can. I have no idea why that happened, to be honest. That's weird. 1 second. There we go. But yes, Minthara as a character, could have been completely ruined, and we sort of saved her design. We improved it, and we helped the developers with her feedback. So, it was very, I don't know what is happening with my internet or this website, to be honest. But anyhow, I'm not even worried about that. Yeah, this was just an appreciation video, and an historical video. May you be blessed and farewell.